I never thought that making a desperate deal with my high school bully would end up being the best decision of my life. My name is Alex Chen. I'm 24 years old. And this is the story of how I went from being terrorized by Ethan Rodriguez to being married to him and discovering that sometimes the person who drives you crazy is the same person you can't live without. It all started during our senior year of high school when I was 17 and drowning in a sea of college applications, part-time job stress, and family expectations that felt impossible to meet. Ethan Rodriguez was 18, captain of the wrestling team, and had made my life miserable for the better part of 3 years with his constant teasing, locker shoves, and general campaign to make me feel invisible except when he wanted a target. I was the classic nerd stereotype: glasses, honor roll, spent lunch periods in the library, had exactly two friends who were just as socially awkward as I was. Ethan was everything I wasn't: popular, athletic, confident in a way that seemed effortless, surrounded by friends who laughed at his jokes and followed his lead. The bullying wasn't violent, exactly, but it was persistent and humiliating. He would knock books out of my hands in the hallway, make jokes about my appearance loud enough for everyone to hear, and had given me the nickname Calculator because I always had one and apparently looked like the kind of person who would name their calculator. I told myself I just had to survive until graduation, that once we graduated I would never have to see Ethan Rodriguez again, that college would be different and I could reinvent myself somewhere far away from the social hierarchy that had trapped me in the role of victim. But then came the announcement that changed everything. Our school had a tradition where the valedictorian and salutatorian were expected to work together on the graduation speech, and as fate would have it, I was valedictorian with a 4.0 GPA and Ethan was salutatorian with a 3.98 GPA that apparently included just enough AP classes to secure the second spot. When Mrs. Henderson announced the partnership in front of the entire senior class, I watched Ethan's face go through a range of emotions that mirrored my own horror. Neither of us wanted to be stuck working together, but there was no getting out of it without seriously damaging our college prospects. The first meeting was scheduled for after school in the library, and I showed up with detailed notes, research about effective speech structure, and a timeline for completing the project. Ethan showed up 15 minutes late with nothing but a bad attitude and a clear desire to be anywhere else. "Look, calculator," he said, slumping into the chair across from me. "Let's just get this over with. You write the smart stuff, I'll deliver it with my natural charisma, and we'll both get through this without killing each other." "My name is Alex," I said quietly, "and if we're going to work together, maybe you could try using it." He looked at me with surprise, as if he had never considered that I might push back against his casual dismissal. "Fine, Alex," he said, and something about the way he said my actual name made my stomach do a weird flip that I didn't want to analyze. "But I'm serious about wanting to get this done quickly. I have better things to do than spend my afternoons in the library." What I discovered over the next few weeks was that Ethan Rodriguez was a lot more complicated than I had given him credit for. When he actually focused on the speech project, he had insightful ideas about what would resonate with our classmates. He was funny in ways that didn't involve making fun of other people. And he was dealing with pressures and expectations that I hadn't realized existed behind his confident facade. "My dad expects me to get a full ride to state for wrestling," he admitted during one of our later sessions, when we had moved from pure hostility to something like professional cooperation. "But my shoulder's been messed up since junior year, and I don't think I'm good enough anymore to compete at the college level." It was the first time he had shared anything personal with me, and I found myself responding with my own confession. "My parents expect me to go to MIT and become an engineer like my father," I said. "But I actually want to study creative writing, and I'm terrified of disappointing them." For a moment, we looked at each other across the library table like we were seeing each other clearly for the first time. Ethan wasn't just the confident bully who had made my life difficult. He was also a scared 18-year-old who was worried about his future and trying to live up to impossible standards. And maybe I wasn't just the weak target he had chosen for his frustrations. Maybe I was also someone who understood the pressure of other people's expectations and the fear of not being good enough. The speech we wrote together was actually pretty good. It managed to be both inspiring and realistic, acknowledging the challenges our class would face while encouraging everyone to pursue their dreams despite obstacles and setbacks. But more importantly, working on the speech had changed something between Ethan and me. He stopped calling me calculator. He stopped knocking books out of my hands. When his friends made jokes at my expense, he would change the subject instead of joining in. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it wasn't active hostility anymore either. It was something neutral and careful, like we were both trying to figure out how to exist in the same space without the familiar dynamic that had defined our relationship for 3 years. The change in our dynamic became more noticeable as graduation approached. Ethan would nod at me in the hallways instead of ignoring me. During group projects in our shared classes, he would actually listen to my ideas instead of dismissing them automatically. I found myself paying attention to him in ways I hadn't before, noticing things that I had missed when I was focused on avoiding his attention. He was actually kind to underclassmen who reminded me of my younger self. He helped teachers clean up after class without being asked. He had a habit of biting his lower lip when he was thinking that was oddly endearing. These observations made me uncomfortable because they didn't fit with the simple narrative I had constructed about Ethan Rodriguez as my antagonist. If he wasn't just a one-dimensional bully, then what was he? And what did that make the strange fluttering feeling I got in my stomach when he smiled at me during our speech practice sessions? Graduation day arrived with typical June heat and the kind of nervous excitement that comes with major life transitions. Our speech went well, with Ethan delivering the sections we had written for him with genuine charm and me handling the more technical parts with what I hoped was adequate public speaking skills. Afterward, at the graduation party that the school always hosted, I was standing alone by the punch table, watching my classmates dance and take photos and promise to keep in touch, when Ethan appeared beside me. "Good job today, Alex," he said, and he seemed genuinely proud of what we had accomplished together. "Thanks," I replied. "You too. You were really good up there." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the celebration around us and probably both thinking about how this was the end of a chapter of our lives. "Somit, who?" Ethan said eventually. "Yeah, if I can survive the academic intensity," I said. "What about you?" "State for wrestling." Ethan was quiet for so long that I thought he might not answer. "Actually," he said finally, "I'm not sure. My shoulder injury is worse than I let on, and I don't think I can compete at the college level anymore. I might need to find a different path." The vulnerability in his admission surprised me. This was the Ethan Rodriguez who had spent 3 years projecting nothing but confidence and control, admitting to uncertainty and fear. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said, and I meant it. "You're more adaptable than you probably realize." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know, Alex," he said, "I owe you an apology. I was a jerk to you for years, and you didn't deserve that. You're actually a pretty cool person, and I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out." The apology was so unexpected and genuine that I felt tears prick at my eyes. "Thanks," I managed to say. "That means a lot. Maybe we could stay in touch?" he asked, sounding almost shy. "I know we're going to different schools, but maybe we could text or something?" I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady, and we exchanged phone numbers with the awkward formality of people who weren't sure what they were to each other, but knew they didn't want to lose contact completely. The summer after graduation passed in a blur of preparation for college, family obligations, and the kind of restless energy that comes with knowing your life is about to change dramatically. Ethan and I texted occasionally, casual messages about summer jobs and college preparations that maintained the tentative connection we had developed. But it wasn't until I was actually at MIT, struggling with the academic intensity and social isolation that I had feared, that our communication became more meaningful. I had been at school for about 6 weeks when I sent Ethan a text at 2 in the morning after a particularly brutal study session that had left me questioning every decision that had led me to this point. "Is it normal to feel like you made a huge mistake with college choice?" I typed, not expecting a response at such a late hour. My phone buzzed almost immediately. "Totally normal," Ethan replied. "I'm having the same crisis. Turns out state without wrestling is just expensive daycare for people who can't figure out what they want to do with their lives." That middle-of-the-night text exchange turned into a regular thing. We would check in with each other about classes, roommate drama, homesickness, and the general anxiety of trying to figure out who we were supposed to become as adults. Ethan had ended up at state after all, but studying business instead of focusing on athletics. He was struggling with feeling directionless and questioning whether he had made the right choice in giving up his wrestling scholarship opportunity. I was struggling with the social dynamics of MIT, where everyone seemed brilliantly confident and I felt like an imposter who had somehow tricked the admissions committee into letting me in. Our conversations became the highlight of my days, something to look forward to during the long hours of studying and the lonely evenings when my roommate was out with friends I had failed to make. Ethan was funny and thoughtful in ways that surprised me. He remembered details from my previous messages and asked follow-up questions that showed he was actually listening. He offered perspective on my academic stress and shared his own vulnerabilities about feeling lost and uncertain about his future. Gradually, I realized that I was looking forward to his messages in ways that went beyond friendship or mutual support. I caught myself checking my phone obsessively, hoping for texts from him. I would craft my responses carefully, trying to be witty or interesting or supportive in ways that would make him want to keep talking to me. The realization that I had developed feelings for Ethan Rodriguez, the same Ethan Rodriguez who had made my high school years miserable, was both thrilling and terrifying. How could I be attracted to someone who had bullied me? What did it say about me that I was developing romantic feelings for someone who had caused me so much stress and humiliation? But the Ethan I was getting to know through our late-night conversations was different from the high school version I remembered. He was thoughtful and self-aware, willing to admit when he was wrong, genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. Maybe people could change. Maybe the circumstances that had made him act like a bully in high school, the pressure to maintain a certain image, the social dynamics that rewarded aggression weren't who he really was at his core. The moment that changed everything happened during Christmas break of our freshman year. We had both come home for the holidays, and Ethan texted to ask if I wanted to meet up for coffee to catch up in person. I agreed, probably too quickly, and we met at a Starbucks near our old high school. Seeing him again after months of text-based communication was jarring in the best possible way. He looked older, more mature, like college had smoothed away some of the rough edges that had made him seem intimidating in high school. "You look good, Alex," he said when he saw me, and the compliment made my face flush in a way that I hoped wasn't obvious. "Thanks, you too," I replied, and it was true. College seemed to be agreeing with him. We talked for hours, covering everything from our classes to our families to our evolving ideas about what we wanted to do after graduation. The conversation was easy and natural, flowing between serious topics and casual jokes without any of the tension that had characterized our high school interactions. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself studying Ethan's face as he talked, noticing details I had never allowed myself to see before. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the expressive gestures he made with his hands when he was explaining something he cared about, the way he bit his lower lip when he was thinking, just like he had during our speech preparation sessions. "Alex," he said eventually, catching me staring, "I need to tell you something." My heart started beating faster, though I wasn't sure if it was from hope or anxiety. "I've been thinking a lot about high school," he continued, "and about how terrible I was to you. I keep trying to figure out why I acted that way, and I think maybe I was dealing with some confusing feelings that I didn't know how to handle." "What kind of feelings?" I asked, though part of me thought I might already know. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his coffee cup like it contained the answers to all of life's mysteries. "I think I had a crush on you," he said finally, so quietly I almost missed it, "in high school, and I didn't know what to do with that, so I turned it into something mean instead of something honest." The admission hit me like a physical force. Ethan Rodriguez, my high school bully, had been attracted to me the entire time he was making my life difficult? "You had a crush on me?" I repeated, needing to hear it again to believe it was real. "Yeah," he said, looking up at me with an expression that was vulnerable and scared and hopeful all at once. "And I think I still do. Actually, I know I still do. These past few months, talking to you, getting to know the real you. Alex, I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and complication and years of history that we would have to navigate if we were going to turn this conversation into something real. "Ethan," I said carefully, "I need you to understand something. If this is going to be anything, if we're going to try to be something to each other, You can never treat me the way you did in high school again. I can't be with someone who hurts me, even if it's because they don't know how to handle their feelings. I know, he said immediately. Alex, I swear to you, I will never hurt you like that again. I was 17 and stupid and scared, and I handled everything in the worst possible way. But I'm not that person anymore, and I would rather lose you completely than hurt you again. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and I found myself believing him in ways that surprised me. I think I'm falling in love with you too, I admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating to say out loud. When Ethan kissed me there in the Starbucks, surrounded by Christmas decorations and the chatter of other customers, it felt like the resolution of something that had been building for years without either of us realizing it. The kiss was soft and tentative, like he was still asking for permission, still making sure this was what I wanted. When we broke apart, we were both smiling and maybe crying a little bit. So what now? I asked. Now we figure it out, Ethan said simply. We're both still in school, we're still figuring out who we are, but maybe we can figure it out together. The long-distance relationship that developed over the next few months was challenging but also incredibly rewarding. We video called almost every day, sharing details of our college experiences and gradually building the kind of intimate connection that I had never experienced with anyone before. Ethan was patient with my insecurities and trust issues, understanding that it would take time for me to fully believe that he wouldn't revert to his old patterns of behavior. He was consistently kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings in ways that made me feel valued and appreciated. I learned that his high school bullying behavior had been his misguided way of getting my attention, that he had been attracted to my intelligence and intensity, but didn't have the emotional maturity to express those feelings appropriately. I used to look forward to first period English because I knew you'd be there, he admitted during one of our late-night video calls. I would sit behind you and listen to you answer questions and think about how smart you were and how much I wanted to talk to you. But I didn't know how to approach someone like you. Someone like me? I asked. Someone who was so obviously out of my league, he said. You were smarter than everyone, including most of the teachers. You had this quiet confidence that I envied. I convinced myself that making fun of you was easier than risking rejection if I tried to actually talk to you. Understanding his motivations didn't excuse his behavior, but it helped me make sense of the contradictions between the Ethan I remembered from high school and the Ethan I was falling in love with in college. The relationship deepened over our sophomore year, with regular visits back and forth between our schools and increasingly serious conversations about our future together. Ethan had found his direction in business school, developing interests in nonprofit management and social entrepreneurship that aligned with values I hadn't known he possessed. I was thriving at MIT, despite my initial struggles, and had even started a tutoring program for underclassmen who were having similar adjustment difficulties. We started talking about transferring to be closer to each other, or at least attending graduate school in the same city. The relationship had become serious enough that we were making major life decisions with each other in mind. But it was during the summer after our sophomore year that we faced our first real test as a couple. I had gotten an internship with a tech company in Silicon Valley, while Ethan was working for a startup in Chicago. We would be apart for 3 months, our longest separation since we had started dating. The distance was harder than either of us had expected. Video calls and text messages felt inadequate compared to the physical presence we had grown accustomed to during our college visits. Worse, we were both working long hours in demanding environments, making it difficult to find time for meaningful conversation. The time zone difference meant that one of us was always tired or distracted when the other was available to talk. 3 weeks into the internship, we had our first real fight as a couple. I had missed a scheduled video call because of a work emergency, and when I finally called Ethan back several hours later, he was hurt and frustrated. I feel like I'm always the one making the effort to maintain this relationship, he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. I'm starting to wonder if this is sustainable long-term. That's not fair, I replied, defensive because I was also feeling the strain of trying to balance work demands with relationship maintenance. I'm doing my best to make this work, but this internship is important for my career. More important than us? Ethan asked, and the question hung heavy between us. We both said things that night that we later regretted. accusations and ultimatums that came from stress and loneliness rather than genuine anger with each other. When we hung up without resolving the fight, I spent the rest of the night wondering if our relationship was strong enough to survive the practical challenges of building careers while maintaining a connection across distance. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Ethan that said simply, "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" The conversation that followed was our first real discussion about the long-term logistics of our relationship. We were both 20 years old, still in college, still figuring out our career paths and life goals. How could we make promises about a future that was still so uncertain? "I love you, Alex," Ethan said during that morning call, "but I don't want either of us to sacrifice our dreams or opportunities for a relationship that might not work out in the long run." "What are you saying?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "I'm saying maybe we should take a break while we finish college and get our careers started. Maybe when we're more established and settled, we can revisit this and see if it still makes sense." The suggestion felt like a knife to my chest, but I also understood the logic behind it. We were both ambitious people with demanding academic programs and career goals that might take us in different directions. "Is that what you want?" I asked. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "What I want is to marry you and build a life together and never have to worry about distance or timing or practical concerns getting in the way of being with you. But I don't know if that's realistic right now." "What if we made it realistic?" I said, the idea forming as I spoke. "What if we made a commitment that took the uncertainty out of the equation?" "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to suggest was either brilliant or completely insane. "What if we got married?" I said. "Not a big wedding or anything dramatic, but a legal commitment that would make all these practical decisions easier. We could apply for graduate programs in the same cities, make career choices that support both of our goals, stop worrying about whether this relationship is worth the investment because we've already decided it is." The silence on the other end of the line was so long that I started to panic, wondering if I had just ruined everything by suggesting something too serious too soon. "Alex," Ethan said finally, "are you proposing to me?" "I guess I am," I replied, surprised by my own boldness. "I love you, Ethan. I can't imagine my life without you in it. If we're going to do this, let's really do it. Let's make a commitment that's bigger than summer internships and college logistics." "That's crazy," Ethan said, but I could hear the smile in his voice. "Good crazy or bad crazy?" "The best kind of crazy," he replied. "Alex Chun, yes, I will marry you." We got married 2 weeks later at the courthouse in San Francisco, with 2 witnesses we recruited from the street and a ceremony that lasted about 10 minutes. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, but it felt perfect for us. We were both wearing the only dress clothes we had brought for our internships. We exchanged simple gold bands that we bought at a jewelry store an hour before the ceremony, and we promised to love and support each other through whatever challenges lay ahead. When the judge pronounced us married, we kissed in front of the small crowd of strangers who had gathered to watch, and I felt like we had just solved every practical problem that had ever threatened our relationship. We were married. We were a team. We were committed to building a life together, no matter what obstacles we faced. The reaction from our families was mixed. My parents were shocked and concerned that we were too young, that we hadn't thought through the implications of such a major decision, that we were making a mistake that would limit our future options. Ethan's parents had similar concerns, but they were also dealing with the additional complexity of their son having married his former male classmate, which required some adjustment to their assumptions about his life path. But both sets of parents loved us enough to support our decision, even if they didn't fully understand it. They threw us a small reception when we returned home at the end of the summer, complete with cake and speeches and the kind of celebration that acknowledged our marriage as real and meaningful. Our friends from college were amazed and maybe a little envious of our certainty about each other. In a world where most people our age were still figuring out what they wanted to study, we had decided we wanted to spend our lives together. The practical benefits of marriage were immediate and significant. We could apply for graduate programs as a married couple, which opened up opportunities for spousal support and joint applications. We could make career decisions with full knowledge of each other's commitments and goals. Most importantly, We had eliminated the uncertainty that had been creating stress in our relationship. We were committed to each other in the most official way possible, which made every other decision easier. We finished our undergraduate degrees at our respective schools, but we chose graduate programs at Northwestern University, where we could both pursue our academic goals while living together in Chicago. I started a PhD program in computer science with a focus on educational technology, while Ethan began an MBA program with a concentration in nonprofit management. Living together as a married couple while still in school was an adventure in domestic partnership. We learned each other's daily rhythms, cooking preferences, cleaning standards, and study habits. Ethan was neater than I had expected, with a systematic approach to household organization that complemented my more chaotic creative process. I was more social than he had realized, bringing home classmates for study groups and dinner parties that transformed our small apartment into a hub for graduate student socializing. We developed routines and traditions that felt uniquely ours. Sunday morning breakfast cooked together while discussing our goals for the week. Evening walks around the neighborhood when we both needed breaks from studying. Movie nights featuring terrible action films that we would mock and analyze with equal enthusiasm. The marriage also forced us to have ongoing conversations about our values, goals, and expectations that couples who were just dating might avoid or postpone. We talked about money management, career priorities, family planning, religious differences, political beliefs, and all the mundane details that determine whether two people can successfully build a shared life. These conversations weren't always easy, but they were always honest. We had committed to being together for the long term, which meant we could address problems directly instead of wondering whether the relationship was worth the effort required to resolve conflicts. 2 years into our marriage, we faced our first major test as a couple when Ethan was offered an incredible job opportunity that would require us to move to Seattle immediately after graduation. The position was with a foundation focused on educational equity, exactly the kind of work Ethan had dreamed of doing. It was also a significant step up in responsibility and compensation from what he could expect from entry-level positions. The problem was that I had been offered a research position at a tech company in Boston that aligned perfectly with my doctoral research and career goals. For the first time since our courthouse wedding, we were facing a situation where our individual ambitions were pulling us in different directions. What do we do? I asked Ethan as we sat in our apartment, looking at the two job offers that represented everything we had worked toward, but couldn't both accept. We make a decision together, Ethan replied, just like we promised we would. The conversation that followed took place over several weeks and involved spreadsheets, pro and con lists, phone calls with mentors and advisors, and long discussions about our short-term and long-term priorities. In the end, we decided that Ethan would take the Seattle position and I would look for opportunities in the Pacific Northwest that would allow me to continue my research while supporting his career advancement. It was a compromise that required sacrifice from both of us, but it felt like the right choice for our partnership as a whole. Moving to Seattle turned out to be one of the best decisions we ever made. The city's tech industry provided plenty of opportunities for my skills and interests, even if they weren't exactly what I had originally planned. I found a position with a startup focused on educational software that allowed me to apply my research in practical ways while building professional experience outside of academia. Ethan thrived in his foundation role, developing programs that provided technology access and digital literacy training to underserved communities throughout the region. Our work complemented each other in ways we hadn't expected, with my technical expertise supporting his program development and his understanding of community needs informing my product design decisions. 3 years after moving to Seattle, we bought our first house together, a small craftsman bungalow in a neighborhood filled with other young professionals and families. The house became a symbol of the life we were building together, with a home office where we could both work, a kitchen large enough for the dinner parties we loved hosting, and a garden where Ethan could indulge his newly discovered interest in growing vegetables. We were 25 years old, married for 5 years, and finally felt like we had created the stable, sustainable life we had been working toward since that impulsive courthouse wedding. But the conversation about starting a family had been ongoing for several years, and we finally decided we were ready to take that step. The process of adoption was lengthy and emotionally intensive, requiring interviews, home studies, background checks, and extensive documentation of our relationship history and parenting philosophy. Some agencies were hesitant to work with us because of our age, our relatively short marriage duration despite being together for years, or their policies regarding same-sex couples. But we eventually found an agency that specialized in working with LGBTQ+ families and understood that our unconventional beginning didn't make us less qualified to be parents. When we were matched with a pregnant teenager who wanted to place her baby with a family that could provide educational opportunities and stability, we felt like all the waiting and paperwork had been worth it. Emma was born on a rainy Tuesday morning in October, and when the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, I understood why people talked about love at first sight. She was perfect in ways that defied description, with dark hair like Ethan's and an alert expression that suggested she was already taking in everything around her. "She looks like she's going to be trouble," Ethan said as he held her, and she seemed to focus on his voice with remarkable attention for such a new human. "The best kind of trouble," I agreed. Parenthood transformed our relationship in ways we hadn't fully anticipated. We were suddenly responsible for another person's well-being, which required new levels of coordination, communication, and mutual support. The early months were exhausting and wonderful, filled with sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the constant wonder of watching Emma discover the world around her. Ethan was a natural father, patient and gentle in ways that reminded me why I had fallen in love with him despite our complicated beginning. He would spend hours holding Emma while she slept, singing her Spanish lullabies that his grandmother had taught him. I discovered that I loved the problem-solving aspects of parenting, figuring out what Emma needed when she was fussy, researching developmental milestones, and creating systems for managing the logistics of caring for an infant while both parents worked demanding jobs. We took turns with night feedings, shared household responsibilities more deliberately, and learned to communicate about our needs and limitations more directly than we ever had before. As Emma grew from infant to toddler, her personality began to emerge in ways that delighted and amazed us. She was curious about everything, fearless in her exploration of our house and yard, and remarkably social even from a young age. She seemed to intuitively understand that she had two dads who loved her completely, showing equal affection for both of us and demonstrating the kind of secure attachment that adoption professionals had told us to hope for. When Emma was 2 years old, we decided to adopt again. This time a little boy named Marcus, whose birth mother had specifically requested a family with experience and multiple children. Having 2 children transformed our household in ways that were both chaotic and fulfilling. Emma became a protective and loving big sister, and Marcus brought his own unique personality to our family dynamic. Our house was suddenly filled with toys, children's books, art projects, and the constant noise and activity that comes with small children who have discovered their voices and independence. But it was also filled with laughter, bedtime stories, family dance parties in the living room, and the kind of joy that comes from watching people you love discover new things about themselves and the world. The question that Emma and Marcus would inevitably ask, "How did you and Papa meet?" required some creative storytelling that emphasized themes of friendship, understanding, and learning to see past first impressions. "Papa and I didn't like each other very much when we first met," I would tell them during bedtime story sessions. "But we learned that sometimes the people who seem different from us can become the most important people in our lives." "Did you fight a lot?" Emma would ask with the directness that only small children possess. "Sometimes," Ethan would answer honestly. "But we learned how to talk to each other instead of fighting, and we discovered that we actually liked each other very much." It was a simplified version of our story, but it captured the essential truth that love can grow from the most unlikely beginnings if people are willing to be honest with each other and commit to understanding rather than judgment. As our children grew older, we faced new questions about identity and family that we hadn't fully anticipated. Emma, now 5, had started asking detailed questions about adoption and what it meant that she had both birth parents and adoptive parents. "Did my birth mom not want me?" she asked one evening during our usual bedtime routine. "Your birth mom loved you very much," I explained carefully. "But she was young and didn't think she could give you everything she wanted you to have. So she made a plan for you to come live with Papa and me because she knew we could give you a safe, loving home." "And you wanted me?" "We wanted you more than anything in the world," Ethan said, sitting down on her bed next to us. From the moment we knew you existed, we loved you completely. These conversations reminded us that parenting adopted children required ongoing honesty about complex topics, age-appropriate discussions about birth families and adoption processes, and constant reassurance about our commitment to them. But they also highlighted how much our own relationship had evolved from its beginning. We were no longer the 18 and 17-year-olds who had made each other's lives difficult in high school hallways. We were adults who had built a family based on deliberate choices, mutual respect, and the kind of love that grows stronger through facing challenges together. When Emma started kindergarten, we had to navigate questions from other parents about our family structure. Most people were curious rather than hostile, but we did encounter occasional ignorance or judgment that reminded us that not everyone saw our family as normal or acceptable. Some people haven't met families like ours before. I explained to Emma after a playdate where another child had asked intrusive questions about her real parents. Are we different? Emma asked, echoing a question that Marcus had also started to ask. We're different in some ways and the same in others, Ethan replied. What matters is that we love each other and take care of each other. As I write this, Ethan and I have been married for 8 years and together for 10. We have built a life that neither of us could have imagined when we were teenagers dealing with the complicated dynamics of high school social hierarchies. We have created a family that embodies the values we believe in: love over fear, understanding over assumption, commitment over convenience. We have careers that fulfill us intellectually and allow us to contribute to causes we care about. We have maintained our friendship with the few high school classmates who have stayed in touch, most of whom are amazed by our transformation from antagonists to life partners. Most importantly, we have proven to ourselves and to our children that people can change, that love can grow from the most unlikely circumstances, and that making a commitment to another person, even an impulsive, crazy commitment made at age 20, can be the foundation for a life of meaning and joy. Our story continues to evolve every day, with new challenges related to parenting, career decisions, family logistics, and the ongoing project of building a marriage that supports both partners' growth and happiness. But the foundation remains the same. Two people who chose each other despite a complicated beginning, who made a deal that seemed crazy at the time but turned out to be the smartest decision either of us ever made. Every morning when I wake up next to Ethan, when I hear our children laughing in their bedrooms, when I think about the life we have built from nothing but determination and love, I am grateful for that desperate deal I made with my bully in a San Francisco courthouse. And every evening, as we put our children to bed and sit together planning for tomorrow, I am amazed by the ordinary miracle of our extraordinary love story that started with antagonism and grew into the kind of partnership that makes everything else possible. The blank pages of our future are still being written, and I cannot wait to see what adventures the next chapters will bring. But life, as we were learning, has a way of testing even the strongest foundations just when you think you have everything figured out. Our next major challenge came when Emma was 6 and Marcus was 4, and it arrived in the form of a phone call that would force us to confront parts of our past that we thought we had left behind. The call came on a Thursday evening in March while we were having dinner, the kind of chaotic family meal where Emma was explaining her day at school in elaborate detail and Marcus was more interested in building sculptures with his mashed potatoes than actually eating them. Ethan's phone rang, and he glanced at the caller ID with a confused expression. "It's my high school wrestling coach," he said, clearly puzzled. "I haven't talked to Coach Martinez in years." He answered the call, stepping into the kitchen for privacy, and I continued helping Marcus with his dinner while keeping one ear on the conversation happening in the next room. From Ethan's side of the call, I could tell something serious was happening. His voice became tense, concerned, and I heard him say things like, "When did this happen? And how bad is it? And of course, I'll be there." When he came back to the dining room, his face was pale and his expression was troubled in a way I hadn't seen since our early days of navigating long-distance relationship challenges. "What's wrong?" I asked, already standing up to clear the children's plates and give us space to talk. "Coach Martinez had a heart attack," Ethan said quietly. "He's in the hospital and it's serious. His wife called the school, and they're trying to reach out to former students because they don't know if he's going to make it." I felt my heart clench with sympathy. Coach Martinez had been one of the few adults at our high school who had treated Ethan with genuine respect and concern. seeing potential in him beyond just his athletic abilities. I need to go back, Ethan continued. I need to see him, to be there for his family. He was important to me during a really difficult time. Of course, I said immediately. When do you want to leave? We could fly out this weekend, Ethan said, then paused. Actually, Alex, would you mind if I went alone? I know the kids have school, and you have that big project deadline next week. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. There was something he wasn't saying, some reason beyond logistics that made him want to handle this trip by himself. Ethan, I said gently, what's really going on? You're not just worried about Coach Martinez. He was quiet for a long moment, helping Marcus down from his chair and watching our son run off to play while avoiding my eyes. Going back to our hometown, he said finally. It's going to bring up a lot of memories, people I haven't seen since graduation, questions about what I've been doing with my life, confrontations with the person I used to be. I began to understand. Our high school years had been painful for both of us, but in different ways. I had been the victim of bullying, but Ethan had been trapped in a role that required him to be someone he wasn't, to maintain an image that had ultimately made him miserable. Are you worried about seeing people who remember you as the wrestling captain who picked on the smart kid? I asked. Partly, Ethan admitted. But I'm also worried about seeing people who remember you as Calculator, the kid I used to torment. What if they can't understand how we ended up together? What if they think you're crazy for marrying someone who treated you so badly? I moved closer to him, taking his hands in mine and looking directly into his eyes. Ethan Rodriguez, I said firmly, I don't care what anyone from high school thinks about our relationship. We know who we are now. We know what we've built together. If people can't understand that people change and grow and fall in love despite complicated beginnings, that's their limitation, not our problem. But what if seeing all those people, being back in that environment, what if it brings back the worst parts of who I used to be? The vulnerability in his question broke my heart. Even after all these years, after building a beautiful life together, Ethan was still afraid that his teenage behavior represented his true character. Then I'll be there to remind you who you really are, I said. We're going together as a family. Emma and Marcus are going to meet their grandparents, and you're going to say goodbye to a teacher who meant something to you. Everything else is just noise. The decision to make the trip a family affair turned out to be exactly what we needed. Having Emma and Marcus with us gave our visit a clear purpose and focus that had nothing to do with high school nostalgia or ancient social dynamics. The flight to our hometown was Emma's first time on an airplane, and her excitement about the experience kept all of us distracted from any anxiety about the visit. Marcus fell asleep before takeoff and slept through most of the journey, which gave Ethan and me time to talk quietly about our expectations and concerns. I want the kids to meet your parents, I said as we watched Emma press her face against the airplane window, marveling at the view of clouds from above. They're going to love them, Ethan replied. My mom has been asking when she was going to meet her grandchildren for years. We had stayed in touch with both sets of our parents through video calls and holiday visits. But this would be the first time Emma and Marcus would spend extended time with their grandparents in person. The hotel we stayed at was near the hospital, allowing us to visit Coach Martinez while also serving as a base for family activities. The first evening, we met Ethan's parents for dinner at a restaurant that had been there since we were in high school. Watching Emma and Marcus interact with their abuela and abuelo was pure joy. Ethan's mother had come prepared with small gifts and photos of Ethan as a child, while his father entertained the kids with magic tricks and jokes that made them giggle uncontrollably. They're beautiful children, Ethan's mother said to me in careful English, squeezing my hand across the dinner table. You and Ethan are good fathers. The validation from Ethan's parents meant more to me than I had expected. Despite years of acceptance and support through phone calls and video chats, having them express pride in our family in person felt like another level of belonging. The visit to Coach Martinez in the hospital was emotional in ways I hadn't anticipated. He was awake and alert, though clearly weakened by his heart attack and the subsequent medical procedures. When he saw Ethan walk into his hospital room, his face lit up with genuine joy. Ethan Rodriguez, he said, his voice raspy but warm. Look at you. You look good, son. Happy. Thanks, coach, Ethan replied, and I could hear the emotion in his voice. I brought some people I wanted you to meet. Ethan introduced me as his husband, and while Coach Martinez looked surprised for a moment, he recovered quickly and shook my hand with a firm grip. So you're the one who tamed this troublemaker, he said with a smile. He was always too smart for his own good, even when he was pretending to be just a wrestler. Then Emma and Marcus were introduced as his grandchildren, and Coach Martinez's face became soft with the kind of wonder that grandparents reserve for small children. Tell me about school, he said to Emma, who launched into an elaborate description of her kindergarten class and her best friend and the hamster they kept in their classroom. Watching this man who had been important to Ethan during his teenage years interact with our children felt like a bridge between different phases of our lives. The past and present were connecting in ways that felt healing rather than painful. After we left the hospital, Ethan was quiet for the rest of the day. That evening, after we had put the kids to bed in our hotel room, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the window at the familiar skyline of our hometown. Seeing Coach Martinez like that, he said eventually, it made me remember how lost I felt in high school. He was one of the few adults who saw something in me beyond just my ability to win wrestling matches. What did he see? I asked, sitting down next to him. Potential, I guess. He used to tell me that I was smart enough to do anything I wanted with my life, that wrestling was just one option among many. But I was so focused on meeting everyone else's expectations that I couldn't see what he was talking about. Ethan turned to look at me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I wish I could go back and tell my 17-year-old self that the kid he was bullying would end up being the love of his life. That all that anger and confusion would turn into something beautiful. Maybe you can't tell your 17-year-old self, I said, but you can model something different for Emma and Marcus. You can show them what it looks like to choose love over fear, understanding over judgment. The next day, we visited our old high school, which was having an alumni event that Coach Martinez had been scheduled to attend before his hospitalization. The school had organized a small memorial gathering in his honor, and several former students had come to share stories and show support for his family. Walking through the hallways of our high school with Emma and Marcus was surreal. The building looked smaller than I remembered, the lockers more cramped, the classrooms less imposing than they had seemed when I was 17. This is where Daddy and Papa went to school, I explained to Emma as we walked past the library where Ethan and I had worked on our graduation speech. Did you like it here? Marcus asked, with the straightforward curiosity of a 4-year-old. Ethan and I looked at each other, both of us thinking about how to answer that question honestly without sharing more complexity than our children were ready to handle. It was complicated, Ethan said finally. We learned a lot here, but we also had to figure out how to be ourselves, which wasn't always easy. At the memorial gathering, we encountered several former classmates who remembered both of us, though their reactions to seeing us together ranged from surprise to delight to confusion. Sarah Kim, who had been in our AP English class, was thrilled to see us. I always wondered what happened to you too, she said. Alex, you were so smart, and Ethan, you were complicated. But look at you now. You have a beautiful family. Her enthusiasm was genuine and warming, a reminder that not everyone from high school would be stuck in old patterns of thinking about who we had been as teenagers. But we also encountered reactions that were less positive. Todd Williams, who had been one of Ethan's wrestling teammates, seemed genuinely confused by our relationship. So you guys are actually married? He asked, looking back and forth between us like he was trying to solve a puzzle. But didn't you used to? Weren't you? Things change, Ethan said simply. People grow up. We figured out what was important. The most challenging encounter was with Mrs. Patterson, our former English teacher, who had witnessed some of Ethan's worst behavior toward me during our senior year. Alex, she said when she saw me, I'm so glad to see you doing well. I always worried about you during that last year of high school. Then she noticed Ethan standing next to me with his arm around my waist, and her expression became complicated. And Ethan, she continued more carefully, I see you've changed. Yes, ma'am, Ethan replied respectfully. I owe Alex several apologies for how I behaved back then. I was dealing with some personal issues in the worst possible way, and he didn't deserve to be the target of my confusion. Mrs. Patterson looked at me with concern that I recognized as genuine care for a former student. "And you're happy?" she asked me directly. "Very happy," I replied, squeezing Ethan's hand. "We have a wonderful life together." She nodded slowly, clearly processing information that challenged her assumptions about both of us. "Well," she said finally, "I suppose love can grow in the most unexpected places." The weekend trip had been emotionally intense, but it had also been healing in ways neither of us had anticipated. Returning to our hometown as adults, as partners, as parents, had allowed us to put our high school experience in perspective. We were no longer the scared, confused teenagers who had hurt each other because we didn't know how to handle complicated feelings. We were adults who had built something beautiful together, who had created a family and a life that reflected our values and choices. On the flight home to Seattle, as Emma slept against my shoulder and Marcus colored in a coloring book on Ethan's lap, we talked quietly about what the trip had meant to us. "I'm glad we went together," Ethan said. "I was afraid that going back would make me feel like that angry teenager again, but having you and the kids there reminded me of who I actually am now." "We're not those people anymore," I agreed. "We're the people we chose to become." The months following our hometown visit brought new challenges and opportunities that tested our ability to adapt and grow as a family unit. The most significant development was a job offer that came to me from a tech company in Austin, Texas. The position was a significant step up in responsibility and compensation, leading a team that would develop educational technology for underserved communities. It was exactly the kind of work I had dreamed of doing, combining my technical skills with social impact in ways that felt meaningful and sustainable. But accepting the offer would mean uprooting our family from Seattle, leaving the life we had built, asking Ethan to find new work in a new city. "What do you think?" I asked Ethan after explaining the details of the job offer. "I think it sounds like an incredible opportunity," he replied without hesitation. "When would they want you to start?" "That's not what I'm asking," I said. "I'm asking what you think about us moving to Austin, about disrupting Emma and Marcus's routine, about you having to leave your foundation work." Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering the implications of such a major change. "Alex," he said finally, "do you remember when we were in graduate school and I got the Seattle job offer? You supported my career advancement even though it meant changing your own plans." "That was different," I protested. "You had been working toward that specific opportunity for years. And you've been working toward this kind of leadership role for years too," Ethan pointed out. "We're a team. We make decisions that support both of our growth, even when it's complicated." The conversation about potentially moving to Austin continued over several weeks, involving research about schools for Emma and Marcus, job prospects for Ethan, cost of living comparisons, and discussions with the kids about how they would feel about living in a new city. Emma was excited about the possibility of adventure and new experiences. Marcus was concerned about leaving his friends but interested in the idea of a house with a swimming pool, which our Austin house hunting had revealed was much more affordable in Texas than in Seattle. Ethan found opportunities with several nonprofits in Austin that aligned with his interests and experience, including one that focused specifically on educational equity in rural Texas communities. After much deliberation, we decided to make the move. It felt like another leap of faith, similar to our courthouse wedding decision years earlier, but grounded in confidence about our ability to build a life together wherever we landed. The moving process with 2 young children was chaotic and stressful in ways we hadn't fully anticipated. Emma handled the transition better than expected, making friends quickly at her new school and embracing the adventure of exploring a new city. Marcus struggled more with the change, missing his Seattle preschool and having difficulty adjusting to the heat and humidity of Texas summers. But as a family, we supported each other through the adjustment period, creating new routines and traditions while maintaining connections to the life we had left behind in Seattle. The house we bought in Austin was larger than our Seattle home, with a backyard big enough for a playset and garden, and yes, the swimming pool that had captured Marcus's imagination during our house hunting trips. My new job was challenging and fulfilling, requiring skills and leadership abilities that I had been developing for years, but had never had the opportunity to fully utilize. Leading a team of software developers and educational specialists felt like the natural evolution of my career trajectory. Ethan's work with rural education initiatives required travel throughout Texas, but it also allowed him to see the direct impact of his program development on communities that had been underserved by traditional educational resources. One evening, about 6 months after our move to Austin, we were sitting on our back patio watching Emma and Marcus play in the pool while the Texas sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been?" Ethan asked, reaching for my hand as we sat in our patio chairs. "Different how?" "If we hadn't been assigned as roommates for that graduation speech. If we hadn't stayed in touch during college. If we hadn't made that crazy decision to get married in San Francisco." I considered his question, thinking about all the moments when our lives could have taken different directions. "I think we would have found each other eventually," I said. "Maybe not in the same way, maybe not as early, but I think we were meant to be together." "You really believe that?" "I believe that some connections are strong enough to survive any circumstances," I replied. "We might have taken a different path, but we would have ended up here with this family, with this life." Ethan squeezed my hand, and we sat in comfortable silence watching our children play, both of us probably thinking about the unlikely journey that had brought us to this moment. The conversation was interrupted by Emma calling out from the pool. "Daddy Alex, Papa Ethan, watch this," she shouted, preparing to demonstrate some elaborate dive that she had been practicing. We turned our attention to our daughter, applauding her pool acrobatics and cheering for Marcus when he wanted to show off his own swimming skills. But later that evening, after we had gotten both kids out of the pool, through baths, and into bed, Ethan and I returned to our conversation about paths not taken and choices that had shaped our lives. "I used to wonder if I was holding you back," Ethan admitted as we cleaned up the kitchen together. "If you would have been happier or more successful with someone who didn't come with all the baggage of our high school history." "Ethan," I said, stopping what I was doing to look at him directly, "you need to understand something. Our history, complicated as it was, is part of what makes our relationship strong. We know each other in ways that couples who met as adults never will." "How do you figure?" "We've seen each other at our worst," I explained. "We've seen each other scared and angry and confused and acting out of fear instead of love. And we chose each other anyway. That's not baggage. That's foundation." The truth of that statement became even more clear to me as I said it. Many couples meet when they're already mature, already settled into their adult personalities. But Ethan and I had witnessed each other's growth from teenagers to adults to parents. We had seen each other make mistakes, learn from them, and become better people. We had supported each other through identity crises, career changes, family challenges, and the ordinary difficulties of building a life together. Besides, I added, moving closer to him and wrapping my arms around his waist, "where's the fun in falling in love with someone who was perfect from the beginning? I like that we had to work to understand each other." When Ethan kissed me there in our Austin kitchen, with the sounds of Texas crickets and our children's quiet breathing from upstairs, it felt like a reaffirmation of every choice that had brought us to this point. 2 years into our Austin life, we faced another major decision when Emma, now 8, started asking detailed questions about adoption and whether she could contact her birth mother. The question came up during one of our regular family meetings, where we discussed upcoming events, resolved conflicts, and gave everyone a chance to share thoughts or concerns. "I want to write a letter to my birth mom," Emma announced with the directness that had characterized her personality since toddlerhood. "I want to tell her about school and Marcus and swimming and ask her questions about why she decided on adoption." Ethan and I exchanged glances, both of us aware that this moment would eventually come, but not entirely prepared for how to handle it. "That's a really important thing to think about," I said carefully. "Can you tell us more about what you're hoping for from writing to her?" Emma considered the question with the seriousness of someone much older than 8. "I want her to know that I'm happy," she said finally. "And I want to know if she thinks about me sometimes. And I want to know if I look like her or if I have her laugh or if she likes the same things I like." Her requests were reasonable and heartfelt, But they also opened up complex questions about contact with birth families, privacy boundaries, and how to navigate relationships that existed outside of our immediate family unit. We can definitely explore that, Ethan said. But we'll need to do some research about the best way to make contact, and we'll need to prepare for different possible responses. The process of facilitating contact between Emma and her birth mother turned out to be more straightforward than we had expected. The adoption agency we had worked with had protocols for this kind of communication, and Emma's birth mother, now in her mid-20s, was open to limited contact. The first exchange was a letter from Emma, written with our help to include appropriate information about her life while maintaining privacy about specific details like our address or her school. Emma's birth mother, Sarah, responded with a letter that was warm and grateful, sharing that she thought about Emma often and was relieved to know that she was happy and thriving. The correspondence continued over several months, with occasional letters that allowed Emma to maintain connection with her birth mother while respecting the boundaries that made sense for everyone involved. Marcus, now 6, watched this process with interest and eventually asked if he could also write to his birth mother. His birth mother was less interested in ongoing contact, but she did send one letter letting him know that she was glad he was happy and that he should feel proud of the person he was becoming. Navigating these relationships required ongoing conversations about identity, belonging, and what it means to have multiple adults who care about your well-being in different ways. Am I supposed to love my birth mom? Emma asked one evening after receiving a particularly warm letter from Sarah. You're supposed to feel whatever feels natural to you, I replied. Some adopted kids develop loving relationships with their birth parents, and others feel grateful but not emotionally connected. Both responses are normal and okay. What if I want to meet her someday? Then we'll help you figure out how to do that safely and appropriately, Ethan said. But there's no rush. You can take as much time as you need to decide what kind of relationship feels right to you. These conversations reminded us that parenting adopted children involves ongoing navigation of complex relationships and identity questions that biological families don't typically face. But they also reinforced our conviction that families built on choice and intention can be just as strong and meaningful as families built on biology. As I write this, Ethan and I have been married for 10 years and together for 12. Emma is 9 years old and has developed into a confident, curious child who loves swimming, reading, and asking questions that make us think deeply about everything from science to ethics. Marcus is 7 years old and has emerged as our family's artist and dreamer, constantly creating elaborate drawings and stories that reflect his vivid imagination and kind heart. We have built a life in Austin that feels sustainable and fulfilling, with careers that utilize our skills and values, friendships that support our family's growth, and connections to both our past and our future. Most importantly, we have created a family culture that celebrates growth, forgiveness, and the power of choosing love even when it's complicated or challenging. Our story continues to evolve every day, with new adventures related to parenting, career development, family relationships, and the ongoing project of building a marriage that supports both partners' dreams and aspirations. But the foundation remains the same. Two people who started as enemies, became friends, fell in love, made an impulsive commitment that turned out to be the smartest decision either of us ever made, and chose to build a family based on intention rather than accident. Every morning when I wake up next to Ethan, when I hear Emma and Marcus laughing together in their bedrooms, when I think about the life we have created from nothing but determination and love, I am grateful for that desperate deal I proposed in a moment of panic about our long-distance relationship. And every evening, as we put our children to bed and sit together on our Austin patio planning for tomorrow, I am amazed by the ordinary miracle of our extraordinary love story that began with antagonism and grew into the kind of partnership that makes everything else possible. The blank pages of our future are still being written, and I cannot wait to see what adventures the next chapters will bring to this family we've built through choice, commitment, and the radical belief that love can grow from the most unlikely beginnings.